So, and I need to open this one more frame again and move this over so I can see. Oops, I just did the wrong thing with that. Nuts. So, sorry, I just want my screen to look the way I want it to so that I can see more stuff. Oh, well, I'm having a glitch with that, so I just won't worry about it. And I just pulled that. Oh, okay, that'll work. Okay, I think I'm set. Sorry about that. I'm apparently being technologically challenged. You know what? I'm recording this, and then we're all going to look at this later and be like, oh my goodness, this woman cannot get her act together. What is the problem here? I hate it when the videos start out with the speaker trying to figure out what they're doing on the screen. But in the last few weeks, I think we've all seen a lot of that. So I'll just assume there's grace for that. Anyway, who I am is I am old. I homeschooled for 31 years. I have 7 children. They're all grown. My youngest is 21 and married, and we have 11 grandchildren now. And I live in Homer, and most of my children live here. So most of my grandchildren live here, which is marvelous. And I don't know what else I was going to say about that. Sorry, I am all sidetracked in my mind. I'm preoccupied with the technology. Sorry about that. I'll get my act together here any second. Anyway, I loved homeschooling. And of course, because I homeschooled for a long time, I went through several different iterations of what my homeschooling looked like. And so, you know, I think that most of us, I at least certainly have an image in my mind of the ideal whatever. I think this is what the ideal homeschooler looks like. This is what the perfect homeschooler is. This is what the perfect mom is, the perfect daughter, the perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect friend, the perfect wife, whatever. And I'm not really always trying to be perfect, but I want to do a good job. And so I think we have this ideal in our mind. This is what this is like. When I think about what I want to be like as a homeschooler and what I want to be like as a friend and whatever, it looks like this. And this is usually contains a lot of characteristics that aren't me. You know, I think, oh, this is the ideal. This is what I want to be like. I want to, you know, have these characteristics. And then there's me. And me is not a lot of those things. Some of them are in there. Some of the characteristics that I think are really important, I indeed do see in myself. And that's a marvelous thing. But some of them are not. And so the question is, like, how do we reconcile these two things? How can I be the best homeschooler I could be? How can I be the best mom I could be? How can I be the best wife that I can be? I have to figure out, you know, so I spent a lot of years working through, like, this is how I wanted to be as a homeschooler. This is what I was like, and how do I reconcile these two things so that I can be the best homeschooler that I can be? I may not end up being this ideal person that I think is the best homeschooler, but you know, how can I be what's best for me and what's best for my kids? So I want to share a little bit about my own journey in homeschooling so that hopefully that will help you a little bit in as you're working through your own journey. And your journey is going to be different than mine. So my ideal homeschooler is Project Paula. This is who I want to be. I want to be Project Paula. And you know Project Paula, right? She lives down the street. Her kids are always having a marvelous time. Your kids go there, they come back, they're like, oh, wow, we did this and this and this. That usually involves messes and projects, and they had such a great time. And she's always got craft things all over her house, and her kids always have marker on their hands and things like that. They're building things out in the yard, and they have paint, and they make dioramas, and they have clay and Play-Doh, and they're doing science experiments all the time, and their kids are just retaining so much of what they learned because they're doing everything really hands-on, and they're making models of the things they're working on. And I just think, oh my goodness, that is the way to homeschool, to have my kids really engaged and immersed in whatever it is that I'm trying to teach them. And I'm so amazed and so impressed, but I don't want that mess at my house. And you know, the worst thing about Project Paula, there is glitter at her house. Lots and lots of glitter. I have a secret to tell you. I hate glitter. I hate it. I liked to play with glitter when I was a kid. I did play with glitter when I was a kid. Now I think, why did my mother let me do that? And my oldest son got to play with glitter, but there's 4 years between him and the next kid. And I'm pretty sure that by the time the next kid was old enough to actually do anything with glitter, there probably was not glitter in my house anymore, because glitter goes everywhere. When my kids go down the street to Project Paula's and then they come home, I vacuum them off in the entryway before they come into the house, because I do not want them traipsing that glitter into my house or whatever else they have. So even though I admire Project Paula and I'm quite impressed with her, I don't want to be her. I don't, well, I do want to be her, but I don't want the mess. Anyway, who I am is Bookworm Brenda. That's really who I am. I love books. I love to be surrounded by books. I love to read books. I love the way they feel. I love the way they smell. I love the pictures on the cover. I love the crisp print on the pages. We have books everywhere in my house. This is my ideal home. This is my happy place. I could live in a room like this. That's just floor to ceiling books and wall to wall books. I would have a marvelous time. And if I only didn't have to clean my house and make meals and do laundry and stuff, I could read all day long. So of course, because I am Bookworm Brenda, but my ideal is Project Paula, you know what I was trying to do all these years. I was trying to turn myself into Project Paula, because I want to be cool. I want to be creating things with my kids, and I want them to be doing things hands-on, and I want everything to be, Amy posted bookworm here too, but jealous of Paula. Totally. I am totally jealous of Paula. And still, I am 61 years old. I haven't homeschooled for, I don't know, a handful of years, and I'm still jealous of Paula. It's true. Somehow I think that if I'm teaching them about butterflies and I get the pasta and we paint the pasta and we glue it on paper, they're going to understand more about butterflies. And my kids are missing out because they're not painting the pasta. I love this picture, by the way. I found that online last night. I made this PowerPoint last night and I thought, oh, that looks really cool. Do I want to actually do it? Probably not. But I would like to read a book about it. Anyway, the first few years that I was homeschooling, yes, the year I started homeschooling was 1986. I do realize most of you were probably children then, but in those days, there was not programs like IDEA, and I had no interest in being affiliated with any kind of school district. I did not want a school district telling me what to do with my children. And so I helped create IDEA, by the way, in 1997. But in 1986, I used library books. I bought things at garage sales. I borrowed things from people. I went to the Christian school to compare with what kinds of things they were covering in that grade. My oldest was in first grade, the first year I homeschooled. I didn't do anything for kindergarten. We were going to Bible school full time and I was busy. So I just skipped kindergarten basically, except of course you don't really skip kindergarten because you're always teaching your kid. That's how homeschooling works, but that's another whole story. So but if I'd been sending him to school, I would have sent him to the Christian school. So I kind of compared what they were doing to make sure I was covering all the important stuff. And I just kind of gradually eased into it. And so, because I just had what I had. Side note, I homeschooled up to 4 children before I got an idea. We were Bible school students. We did not have money, and I never spent more than $200 a year on all of my kids. I did most of my schooling through the library and through things I borrowed and bought used, and we got along just fine. So my first suggestion is to relax and ease into changes. Whenever you like are starting the year, or when you're changing something about how you're homeschooling, if you're changing something about your style of homeschooling, or maybe you're going from something like Saxon math to Matthew C or to Singapore math. Those are very different approaches. And so just kind of ease into it gradually. One of my most important tips that I like to share with people that took me years to learn, 1 year, I always put together my own curriculum, and 1 year I had ordered some things and I didn't have everything. This must have been after IDEA came along and I had money. But it was time when I wanted to be starting school and I only had some of my stuff. So I thought, oh, well, I'm just going to start anyway. We're just going to do math and science, or we're just going to do grammar and spelling and history. And then we'll do the other stuff when it comes. And then as the things came, we gradually added on other things. Oh my goodness, smartest thing ever. Do this, trust me. And so, because the deal is, like, if you're taking off sometime in the summer, and then you gear up and you're like, okay, I'm going to start homeschooling on Monday. And then you try to just jump in and do everything on Monday. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming for you and it's overwhelming for the kids. And then it gets to be late afternoon and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm still trying to get the homeschooling done. I haven't started fixing dinner yet, whatever. It's just so much easier if you would just do like a subject or two, like do a bunch of language arts stuff. We're going to read, we're going to do handwriting, we're going to do grammar, we're going to do spelling, we're going to do phonics, whatever it is that you're doing. We're going to do these things. And maybe we'll do science on Friday or whatever. Next week we'll add our math in, or whatever it is that you do. But just kind of add it on gradually. So much easier, trust me. So then after that, so I kind of just kind of was winging it with little stuff. After I did that for a few years, I was getting more comfortable with it. And so then I thought, okay, maybe I can take on this Project Paula thing a little bit, you know? So I started doing some projects and I wanted everything to be integrated and relevant and related. And I just thought, oh my goodness, this is the way to teach things. This is so much better than having separate subjects, which I didn't always have separate subjects, but they weren't really. I didn't do a lot of hands-on, well, that's not true. Anyway, I didn't do a lot of projects. I did hands-on stuff, but we didn't do lots of artsy things. We didn't build lots of things necessarily. So I did, so that year, I started for several years. I did like these 2-week unit studies. In fact, a friend of mine from Homer, who is a young woman who is homeschooling her kids, is in this group. And I borrowed something from her mom. They had, Ranger Rick magazine used to have these unit study magazines you could get. And I borrowed this unit study on birds. I wasn't actually going to share this one, but I saw Erin in here. Hi, Erin. And so I borrowed this unit study on birds. And what I remember most about it was the first project. Maybe I only did the first one. I don't know. But they had this elaborate project where you brought in, like I brought in a log from outside, and I had you set up all these kind of feeding stations for different kinds of birds. So you have a log and you sprinkle rice on it. And I had a vase with some water in it. And I had a bowl of water with styrofoam floating in it. And I can't remember. There's like nuts and stuff. There's like 8 maybe different things. And then you have these different tools, like a straw goes with the vase, and tweezers go with the little rice on the logs, and the nutcracker goes with the nuts, and there's a sieve that goes with the water. And then there's pictures of all these different kinds of birds with different kinds of beaks, and the idea is what kind of beak is designed for the rice on the log is supposed to be ants or whatever, and the styrofoam is supposed to be like fish in the water and things like that. And so you're learning about like how birds are designed, that they have different kinds of beaks to eat different kinds of things. And I did a lot of like 2 or 3 week unit studies on things like that. We did one on the solar system, we did one on the human body, and they were great. I liked doing them, the kids liked doing them. I do think they learned more through doing that, but they were very involved. And in those days, there weren't as many like things you could buy that just had it all laid out for you. And so I would be putting things together myself. I would be using different resources that, oh, this will support this idea. And like IDEA has these kits that we will send out to you if you want to borrow them in our library. And they're kind of like that. They have different sorts of things all put together that you can make a unit study out of if you want to. So that's what I was doing, was putting things together. And so it would take me a lot of planning time so I could only do them. Like I would plan for a while and then we'd do this 2-week study. And then I would plan for like a month and then we'd do another 2-week study. And then I would plan for a while and do another one like that. So we weren't doing like projecty kind of things all the time. I could only be Project Paula for a short period of time very effectively because I couldn't be doing one and planning another one. It was just too much for me. And of course I kept having babies, so that, you know, makes a difference too. And then after I've been homeschooling, oh, sorry. So the tip that I wanted to share about that is to take time to plan. However, whatever your homeschooling style is, if you make time to plan ahead of time, it does make everything go smoother. Even if you're not a planning kind of person, if you at least have some kind of general plan of what it is you want to be accomplishing and how you want to blend these materials together and have them support each other, then everything just goes more smoothly. So even though like I couldn't do it all the time, but I could plan and then execute and then plan and then execute. And in the meantime, we're still doing our math and our spelling and all that kind of stuff every day. So then after I'd been homeschooling about 10 years, I moved on to full year themes. Like I couldn't be too projecty all the time, but I could do like a theme for the year. One year we did world geography. At that time, my oldest son was going to the Christian school, and I did homeschool all my kids all the way through, but some of them, a couple of them went to Christian school. One went to Christian school for a few years, one went for 1 year, and one went to public school for a couple of years. Anyway, so I've done a couple of different things with kids, just depending on where those kids are at and what the resources are in my community and what's better for my household and all that kind of stuff. But so this year, my oldest son was going to school. My second oldest son was in 6th grade, and then I had a 2nd grader, and then I had a kindergartner, and then I had a baby. I think I'd have to think it through how many kids. Oh, I had 2 babies then, or 3 babies, whatever works out to how many kids I had. I had 6 kids at the time, so I guess I was homeschooling 3, had 1 going to school, and had 2 younger kids. Anyway, so we did this year around world geography, and I wanted them. Well, let me just talk about the goals. Like I thought through, okay, I want to structure this year around world geography. So what are my goals for the year? What do I think is necessary in this? What do I really want them to learn? I really wanted them to have a general sense of what different parts of the world were like. If I say to you, hey, I drove up West Hill today and I saw a house that looked like a Swiss chalet, or even I saw this really cute chalet, you know what I'm talking about. You would have some kind of image in your mind, but my children wouldn't necessarily. So I wanted them to, or if I said, oh my goodness, it's been raining so much, it feels like I'm in Venice, you know what I'm talking about. And so I wanted them to like have an image in their mind, have a sense of what it's like in different areas, how they live, what their houses are like, what their transportation is like, what kind of food they eat, that kind of stuff. And so we studied, I started in Europe. And so like when we did Germany, well, I would go, in those days, the libraries had VHS videos and you could borrow them. And so I went to the library and I would borrow these travel videos. Travel videos are extremely boring. And they were like an hour and a half. I think they were an hour and a half long, actually. And I would put the video in and we would all gather around the TV and I would push play and then I would push fast forward. And we would fast forward through the video and just watch the pictures going by because I wanted them to have that mental stimulation visual stimulation of what this place looked like. And then when they showed like the clocks, whatever those are called, where the little guys come out and dance around that they have in Germany, somebody would go stop and we would pause it and we would rewind and then we would listen to it for a little bit and then it would start getting boring again, fast forward, and then they would start talking about how German children eat chocolate spread on bread for lunch. My kids want to see that. We stop, we rewind, we listen to that part, like that. And so we would do a whole video in like 20 minutes that was maybe an hour and a half long. And I would get like children's books from the library. I would read books about the place. Sometimes I would read books by authors, like we would read Grimm's fairy tales when we were doing Germany, for instance. And I had a friend who grew up in Germany, and so I had her come over, and she made soft pretzels with the kids, and she told them about growing up in Germany, and she spoke to them in German a little bit. And I have another friend that emigrated here when he was 13, and so from Holland, and so he brought over wooden shoes, and he explained what dikes are really like and how that story of the boy with his finger in the dike is nonsense and drives Dutch people crazy. And so they got like some hands-on stuff. That was my attempt at being projecty. Have somebody come over, talk about it, bring some artifacts maybe. That worked great. That was like perfect for me. I didn't have to do any prep, but they got to do some hands-on stuff. And then, so I would set goals for things like that. Like another thing about the world geography thing, I wanted them to, my other big goal. So I wanted them to have a sense of what the countries were like, and I wanted them to have a sense of where they were. So if they heard Ethiopia in the news at some point, they would know which continent to look on. They wouldn't just be lost having no idea where it was. They would immediately know some things about it. Oh, it's in Africa, it's hot, the people are black, and that kind of thing, you know? And so I had a map on the wall, and we would go over things that I wanted them to memorize every day. We would go over it every day, and then I would give them a little quiz on Friday, and they'd get a blank map, and they'd have a list of countries and capitals, and they would label them. And another little side note, we used to do this thing that we called Penny Day, and Friday was Penny Day, which I might have gotten that from my friend Sally as well, Erin. But in any case, I did that for years, and we did all our quizzes on Friday, and everything that the kids got right, they got a penny for. So that worked great. And so like I had the 6th grader and the 2nd grader. So the 2nd grader, my goal for that one, in terms of what he was memorizing, like when we started with Europe, was there was 15 things. I picked 5 countries, and it was like, you know, Germany, France, Italy, like that. And then, you know, some of the major ones. And then the 5 capitals. And then there was 5 other things. And it was like Atlantic Ocean, Mediterranean, Scandinavia, Mediterranean Sea, Scandinavia, Alps, maybe Great Britain. I can't quite remember what they were. And then they'd get to have this blank map on Friday, and they'd have to fill in everything they knew. And whatever they got right, they got a penny for. So for my 6th grader, I wanted him really to learn all the countries in Europe. And he did. He learned all the countries and almost all the capitals and those 5 things. And the 2nd grader learned, I don't know, I set this goal for him to learn 15. He probably learned 50 of those, maybe, because he had that incentive. But so I had this is necessary. I want you to learn these 15 things. I want you to have a sense of what these countries are like. I want you to have an idea where they're at. The important things are they could learn more of the countries. That would be good. If they could tell me more about different aspects about the countries, you know, that would be good. And I don't know, I can't think of a good one right this minute. But whenever I would set goals for whatever subject for the year, I would, or maybe like science is not my thing. I think I've probably made that clear because I don't like the messes. So maybe I would be thinking, okay, I'm really not doing very much science this year. We're going to do magnetism, and we're going to do the water cycle, and we're going to do electricity, and we're going to do rocks. And those are the things that I'm going to accomplish this year in science. And then maybe there's, I'm not doing a very good job giving an example of this. I did not write one down. Anyway, and then, you know, maybe there's some other subject areas that I might do. Maybe I think, oh, I'm not doing this very well. I'm going to cover these 4 things. It would be important to do science at least once a week, but you know, my goal is going to be to do it twice a week because I don't like science and I'm not doing it very often. So I'm going to try to be really consistent about doing it twice a week. That's important. It would be good if I do it 3 times a week, or if I do one real experiment every other week, or whatever it is I think I can handle. And then, because if you set some big goals, so that's my next point, is to set a few big goals for the year. If you set some big goals, then it's easy for you to filter through the day. If you get really busy, you know what you can drop. If you get overwhelmed by too much stuff, you know what you can drop. You know, as long as you focus on these are the important things. My kid needs to learn the multiplication tables this year. We need to cover these 4 areas in science. This is what I'm doing. You know, we're going to do the Civil War. I want to do Civil War and Reconstruction, but we're going to do the Civil War. Then as long as you have these big goals in mind, it's easy for you to filter through stuff. It helps you when you're buying things to buy the things that meet those big goals and not waste time buying all the stuff that you're not going to use. And it also helps you to filter out your day when your days get too busy, and and you feel successful. If you meet those big goals, even if you don't do everything that you wanted to do this year, well, I didn't. I ended up not doing science 3 days a week. I ended up just doing it 2 days a week. And we ended up doing an experiment once a month, not twice a month. But I met the big goals. We covered these 4 subject areas in science, or not subject topics in science, and we accomplished that. And that was my real goal. So the other stuff is just good, nice. It might be important, but if I didn't get to it all, it's okay. I covered the big goals. So I really recommend that. After I'd been homeschooling about 20 years, then I really got into just having a literature focus. I was in a different place in my life. 3 of my kids had already graduated. I had a son that was a senior. I have 6 boys and 1 girl. My daughter was a freshman, and I had a son in 7th grade, and my youngest was in 1st grade. When Nathan started kindergarten, I ordered Sunlight from him because by then I was just tired and busy and working more and more for IDEA all the time and taking on bigger and bigger projects. And so I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to order a package this year and see how it goes. And I didn't use I mean, I did like supplement their package a little bit. I didn't always use everything from Sunlight, but I did do Sunlight all the way through with Nathan, and he loved it and I loved it. And we always had lots of literature for all the kids because I love to read and they love books. And so I was reading books even to my high school students and did all the way through because they asked me to. So my suggestion about that is, sorry, I just thought I should look at my notes and see if there was something I should have said, is to rest in who you are and your season of life. I did a different workshop called Making the Most of the Season of Life. And you know, we go through different seasons in our life. We're in different places at different times. And part of maturing, part of growing up, honestly, is coming to terms with who you are compared with this goal that you have for yourself and learning to rest in that. Not that we don't keep striving to be better in some areas, but I don't know how to explain it, but there's a balance between resting in this is who I was created to be. And I've tried to do this, but I'm not good at that. So, but I'm really good at this, and learn how to maximize your strengths and minimize your weaknesses. And just rest in what season you're in. When you're considering how can I homeschool, um, Jane, I'll come back to that. Um, when when you're thinking about how to homeschool and what, now I'm distracted. Hi, Erin. Um, anyway, think about, you know, use what you have, use what your situation is. Think about what are your strengths, what situation are you in, what's your schedule like. There's a lot of things to ask yourself, and they all affect how you homeschool. How many kids are you homeschooling? How old are those kids? If I've got 1 kid in 5th grade that I'm homeschooling, or I have 5 kids and they're all different ages, my own children are 19 years apart from my oldest and my youngest. So I always had a wide spread. Well, not always, but most of the time I had a wide spread in my kids, and that affects how things happen in your home, how your homeschooling looks. Do you have any big changes happening this year? Are you moving? Are you having a baby? Are you dealing with some kind of illness in your home? Um, all those things affect how much time and energy you have to homeschool. Some years, like 1 year, we were building a house, and we had been living in a mobile home previously. We sold the mobile home and used that money. We had to deposit that money in the bank in order to get a construction loan. That there was $10,000. So we put $10,000 in the bank. Then they gave us a construction loan to build this house that I live in now, and I bought Calvert for one of my kids that year, and we did Calvert that year. I didn't do the same thing with all the kids. Part of the reason I bought Calvert was because I wanted that's A Child's History of the World, and at the time they didn't sell it individually. It's a great book, by the way, and I bought Calvert because I wanted that one book. But and also I was thinking I'm building a house and trying to homeschool. I also had a kid who had some learning problems, and he was in second grade, I think, that year. I think he was third grade age, but second grade ability. And I put him in the public school for a year so that he could get special ed services, which I could have done without enrolling him. But we were building the house, and I knew he needed consistency. He needed me to work with him every single day. And I knew I wasn't going to have time. And in fact, my father died that year too. And flew back. I'm from the DC area, and I flew back home a couple of times that year. And so it turned out to be the best thing ever that I had put him in school. I think it was really important for him to have that consistency. So like that year I had Calvert and I had him in school because I had things going on. I knew that my mother and father died a year and a half apart. I knew there was a likelihood of my father dying that year. I knew we were building a house. We were living at my in-laws' house while we were building this house. And so that, of course, is a stressor. I mean, they were great, but it's just hard to live in somebody else's house. So you just need to consider those things. How much space do you have? When we were at Bible school, I had 4 kids and we lived in 600 square feet. And so that affects how you're homeschooling. Maybe you have a room in your house that you can use for a homeschool room, and you can have tables there and you can leave stuff spread out so you can make these big dioramas, and you can leave out science stuff all over the place. And but maybe you're living in a little teeny place, and the school books have to be in boxes. You have to pull out what you do it on the table, and then put it right back to do the next thing because there just isn't room to spread anything out. That affects how you homeschool and what kind of materials you're going to use and what your style is going to be. Are you working? Are you volunteering somewhere? Are you helping your spouse build a business? Are you doing some kind of online business yourself? What kinds of things do you like to do? What kinds of things do your kids like to do? Do you like to read? Do you like to do art? Do you like to do science experiments, music, tell stories, write, make posters, paint? There's all kinds of things to take into account. What are their interests and what are my interests? Because you're going to be more enthusiastic about the things that you're interested in. We Oh, forget it. I'm going to skip that story. I had the story earlier. Oh, forget it. I'm just going to tell it anyway. Your kids' personalities affect this too. I have one kid who, when he was young, he did not like to be dirty. And so before we built this house, we lived in a mobile home, and he would play outside and his hands would get dirty, and he didn't like his hands dirty. And so he would come in the house and tromp through the house and go in the kitchen and wash his hands. So when we were designing this house, I was like, you know what? Let's put a utility sink in the entryway so that Caleb could come in from outside on the vinyl, wash his hands, and when they have muddy boots, we can rinse them off right there in the entryway and all that kind of stuff. I love having a utility sink in our entryway, by the way. We have a pretty big entryway, and that was a really great move. But you just have to plan around the space that you have, and you have to plan things that cater to your kids' interest and their personalities and your own interest and your own personality. When so I was As I was going through my homeschool years, and as I was longing to be Project Paula, as I love whoever it was that said that I'm jealous of Project Paula. um, I was concerned because I felt like I really did think, and in fact, I still think that that is the best model of homeschooling, the way Project Paula does it, where they're building dioramas and they're making all these projects. And, I asked Project Paula's kids, how's homeschooling going? And they go, oh, great. We built a model of the Mayflower last week and we floated it in Ketchimack Bay. I live in Homer, little location specific reference, but they say stuff like that. And I think, oh my goodness, I have no interest in doing something like that. But I am jealous. And I really do think those kids are having a better experience than my kids are with homeschooling. And I was worried all those years about my kids missing out because I wasn't Project Paula. And you know what? They did miss out. They missed out on having their hands in messes all the time. They missed out on glitter. They missed out on having things like creating something that goes with what they're learning about. But you know what else? They gained a lot of things because they had me as their homeschooling mom. My kids love books. All of my kids love books. Our whole family loves books. We recommend books to each other. My kids share books with each other. They listen to an audiobook and then they're like, oh, you have got to listen to this audiobook. They listen to audiobooks all the time. I was listening to an audiobook this week and there was this one little scene in the book that takes place between a 12-year-old girl and her 7-year-old brother. And it so reminded me of the relationship between my daughter and my youngest son. And so I made, because it was an audiobook, I wrote down a little bit what the conversation was. And we've been getting together and having family dinner over Facebook. We do a Facebook video call every Wednesday night. And so while we've all been separated, and I have a son who lives in Anchorage and my daughter's living in Michigan right now, and everybody else is here, but it's so fun to have everybody together. Not everybody is always there every Wednesday, but some people are there every Wednesday. And so last night I was telling them the story. I was like, oh, listen to what I read this week. You know, I heard this in my audiobook and it so made me think of you. And we had this conversation about the relationship between big sisters and little brothers. We have those kind of conversations all the time. If my kids want to learn something new, they read about it. They love to read. They get books. They look up articles online. They'll watch YouTube videos too. You know, now we have so much more access to that kind of stuff. But years ago, when my older kids were young, they would sit around and read the encyclopedia and they would look up things in the encyclopedia. We talk about words, you know, we're in the middle of saying something and then we'll go, oh, I wonder where that comes from. That's a funny saying. And we'll pull out a dictionary or we'll look it up now on our phones or whatever. But that's really common for us to talk about words and talk about books. My son Drew, he was living in Hawaii and he and his wife had their first baby and they wanted me to come when they had their baby. And so I did. And when we were preparing for the trip, Drew said, bring a book to read to Sarah Jade and I, because he so loved all those years that I read books to him. And he wanted his wife to have that experience and he wanted to share that experience with her. And he wanted to experience it himself too. So there's all kinds of pluses to them having me as their homeschooling mom. And they may not have had the experience that I thought was ideal, but they had a different experience that was appropriate for them. And another thing that's relatively common, my husband and I used to talk pretty often when we had young children and we were hanging around with a lot of other young families, and I'm sure this will resonate with you as well. We would comment on how all the kids in a family frequently would have some characteristics in common, even though they're all different, you know, and they all have different personalities and they all have different strengths and weaknesses. They just have things in common because they're part of that family unit. And my kids do. We love to laugh. We're all funny. We're all sarcastic. We all love to joke. We all love books. We love talking about big ideas. Most of my kids love history. I love history. Most of my kids like history anyway, but we like big ideas. We like talking about how, oh, this happened at this time in history, and the ripples that went out affected this here and this here and this now, even though that was 150 years ago or whatever. We love having those kinds of conversations. So there's a lot of fruit of that. Oh, I know. Another thing I wanted to share, when my son that was having some learning problems, when he went to the public school, he ended up going to the public school for 2 years. And the first parent teacher conference, well, that's not true. He only went 1 year and then he went to the Christian school for a year. But in any case, the first parent teacher conference that I went to at the public school, you know, it was like the 6 week mark or the quarter or something. And so we go and we meet with her and she goes, well, and he had a hard time behaving in the classroom. So she thought he was misbehaving. She was like, he just gets up and walks off to the bathroom when he has to go to the bathroom instead of raising his hand and asking. I thought, he's a homeschooler, you know, but anyway, she was working with him on those kinds of things. But her big praise was, she goes, whenever we have a conversation about something in the class, Joel always has something to contribute to the conversation. Mind you, I was dumbfounded at this comment. I didn't even know how to respond. I said, yes. And she said, well, that's really unusual. And I said, it's unusual for the kids to have something to contribute to the conversation. And she said, yeah. She said, you can tell that you talk with your children and that you guys are talking about what's going on in the news and whatever, different topics, and having conversations with them. And I was like, yeah. I said, doesn't everybody do that? She said, no. She said, it's pretty unusual. And it was like, oh, I was so surprised. But um, I think that's all part of that culture of reading lots of books together and discussing the ideas in the books. We just talked about everything. And also, so like because families tend to have things in common, the likelihood that your style of what fits you and how you like to homeschool fits your children as well is pretty high. Not that you shouldn't adjust for some children. I have one child that was very kinesthetic, and I used really different materials with him than I did with the other kids because he really needed to have his hands in stuff to be learning. But and you do need to cater to that. But your kids, you've all been put together in this family for a reason. And the point that I really want to make is that you are the perfect homeschooler for your child. You can minister to their hearts and teach their minds and develop their character just who you are. Again, it is important to always be trying to improve, and it is important to, I think when you look at those ideals of what this would be like, I've learned over the years to not strive to be that ideal, but to look at that ideal more critically and think about, okay, here's my strengths and weaknesses, here's this ideal's strengths and weaknesses, and so which of those can I incorporate? Which of those can I blend into who I am? And which of those can't I? And just let those things go, let the things go that you are not going to be, and embrace who you are, embrace your own strengths and weaknesses, and trust me, you'll be doing a great job with your kids. So let me switch this screen here. I'm not very good at doing any of this stuff smoothly. Stop sharing my screen. There we go. Now I think you're just seeing me. Oh no, maybe you're not seeing me. Darn.
They see you, Carol.
Sorry, I really don't know what I'm doing.
They see you, Carol.
Okay, let me pull this open. Okay. And let me look in here. What did people say? Again, I love this comment about being jealous of Paula. My oldest is going to be a second grader. My middle son is starting kindergarten, and I have a 2-year-old. So I'm just at the beginning of my homeschool career. How do I choose the big goals? You know what? I chose them. I gave an example of having some kind of for the family. It was really just what I wanted to do. But I always had goals for the particular kids. Like if your oldest is going into second grade next year, maybe your goal, a long time since I had a second grader, this might not be appropriate. Maybe your goal is for him to start learning his multiplication facts, or maybe your goal, maybe he's good at spelling, but he mixes up his letters sometimes. So your goal is to like get these letters down. Or maybe your goal is, I always just picked whatever I wanted to do for science and history. I probably shouldn't say this as an idea staff, but I never paid all that much attention to what the standards were or what the other kids were doing in those grades. I just picked whatever subjects I thought we wanted to do. And honestly, I can distinctly remember one year sitting down with my kids. I would sit down with my kids at the end of the year and I'd go, what do you think we should learn next year? And see what they had to say. And I can remember one of my kids going, he was, I don't know, he was older. Maybe, I want to say 6th grade, but that I might be confusing that with the world geography year because that doesn't make sense. But in any case, I said, what do you think we should be learning next year? And he said, you know what? I have never learned all the states. I think that I should learn the states and the capitals. It's like, that sounds great. We should do that. So, but mostly I picked like specific things like, maybe your goals for the kindergartner are recognizing all his letters and whatever. Like I just picked, it's hard to explain, but I just picked a few things that were really important for them to know by the end of the year. And sometimes they were kind of arbitrary. Maybe one of your goals is you want them to learn to set the table. You know, maybe you want the kindergartner to learn to sort out his toys in his bedroom so that it's easier to clean up the room. You know, I don't know. It could be anything. It could be a character issue. It can be math facts. It can be spelling facts. It can be history topics, things like that. Let me see what the other. Let me know if I didn't get that right, Jane. Uh, oh, Erin wants me to share. This is my other most important homeschooling tip. I just wasn't going to share it in this one, but it is the best homeschooling tip ever. This is what I did for a million years. And this is the biggest benefit of being Bookworm Brenda. Got to tell you, I read to my kids all the time. I read, I never used a history textbook ever. And so we did all of our history from books, from nonfiction and biographies and historical fiction and all that. And so I would, when I was young, my first boyfriend when I was in 8th grade, his mother was my science teacher, and she had 7 children. He was the oldest. The youngest was 5. He was 14, and then she had a 5-year-old. And it was during the Vietnam War, and her husband was at war. She was teaching in a school, grading papers, and had 7 kids from 14 to 5. So she had all the kids doing the chores. It made such an impression on me. I thought, oh my goodness, I had no idea that. I mean, like it was really important for them to be doing the chores, you know? And after that, I went to work at a daycare center, and at the daycare center, they had everybody, they had the babies cleaning up after themselves. And it had never crossed my mind to have my babies clean up after themselves. So those two things impacted me so that I had all my kids do all the chores. I fixed meals and, oversaw everything, but they did all the vacuuming and sweeping and dishes and cleaning up the kitchen and cleaning out the litter box and making their beds and doing the laundry and all that stuff. When my kids are 7, they start doing their own laundry. So, because I don't like doing laundry. But but in the meantime, while they're doing all the chores, I'm reading to them. So I would carry books around, and I would like stand in the bathroom doorway while they're cleaning the bathroom. I'd go stand in the entryway while they're cleaning the litter box out. I'm in the kitchen with them while they're sweeping or doing dishes. And I'm kind of following the kids around, and they would kind of gather around and pitch in together on something that needed to be done while I was reading these books to them. And that's part of why they love books and they love being read to. And it's the best tip ever. It's a win-win. You're covering schoolwork and you're getting your chores done. And they can listen. They're doing something with their hands. So they enjoy doing the chores better. They do a better job. They do more of their chores because they're listening to something. In fact, actually, lots of times they'll just stop and I'll go, "What are you doing?" They go, "Oh, sorry, I was listening." And I love that. Um, Odessa says, how difficult is it for me to use the same topic for my 9-year-old, my 12-year-old? Not difficult at all. It kind of depends. Like math is sequential. You have to do math separately. For a 9 and 12-year-old, certainly you have to do it separately. You don't always have to do it separately for all your kids, but pretty much. And language arts is somewhat sequential. So there's some things there that you have to do separately, but history and science and art and music and all that kind of stuff you can do together. We did science and history together all the time, had the same kind of topics. And Amy says, great advice. I spent way too much time trying to be the perfect homeschool mom. Makes me think of that quote, to dream of the person you want to be is to waste the person you are. I knew my personality when he gave me these kids, right? Totally true. I have not heard that quote before, but I would agree with that quote. In fact, I might claim that I made it. I did not, but that suits me very well. So, does anybody else, I went through all the questions. Does anybody else have anything they want to say? I can unmute you. or if you want to ask a question, or if you have anything else to contribute that would add to what I've said and be helpful to people, because I'm sure there is so much wisdom in this group that we did not even tap because you're all patiently listening to me rambling on and on. Thank you so much for coming and for contributing. Odessa asked, are there specific topics that I need to cover for each grade level? Again, Odessa, I'm probably not doing a good job speaking for the public school that I work for, but no, I, um, well, like I said, math, you really need to be doing math. Your second graders should be doing second grade math. Some programs do that a little bit differently, like Math UC doesn't structure it on grade levels, for instance. They structure it by skill level, by what kinds of skills they're learning. Um, but and language, like you really need to do phonics when they're little. You really need to do short vowel words in spelling before you do long vowel words or whatever. There is some sequence to some things, but and there are important, like I think it's worth looking through the scope and sequence of what the schools are teaching in school and covering those sorts of things. And side note, when you get to high school, it does matter. You do need to pick certain classes, like you do need to do, well, you don't really need to do biology necessarily, but you do need to have whatever, I'm making this up right now because it's not coming to the top of my head, but 3 sciences and 3 histories or 4 of them or whatever it is. And so you do have to do some things in a certain way. But in general, with the younger kids, you don't have to cover a specific topic for each grade. Like I said, for history and science, we just did whatever we wanted. I never paid any attention to what they were doing in those grades. Um, Jennifer asked what I use for audiobooks. I am cheap, so I use the library. There's an app you download called Libby, and if you have a library card, you can download books from the library. So, that's more limited than like Audible or buying audiobooks from Amazon, but there are a million of them, and somehow I've managed to keep finding books I want to read or listen to. One thing I always say is to make the material work for you. You don't have to use all of the material included in one curriculum. Exactly, Emily. I totally agree with that. And another thing that I said in one of my other workshops is that I have a secret for you. In school, they never finish the textbook, ever. So don't set that as your goal. Don't worry a ton about finishing the textbook. That's not the most important thing. Your goal should not be to finish the textbook. Your goal should be to cover these topics. These are the things that I really want my kids to learn this year. And it's less dependent on what topics that textbook might be covering or what topics a 4th grader might be doing if they were going to school than it is dependent on where your kid's at. Okay, my kid's in 5th grade and still doesn't have all his multiplication facts memorized. I know that most kids did that in 3rd grade or whatever they did it. We are doing that this year, and I just buy a bunch of multiplication fact games and stuff. And this is what we're doing. We're going to work on this. This is my goal, and I probably would have other goals for math too, but nonetheless, that would be a primary goal. Things like that, just trying to determine things that your kids aren't as good in or things that they're asking questions about, things that they seem to not totally be picking up on. These are the things that I would make for my goals. Did you take long breaks for the summer? Chrissy says. No, you know what? Because we read so much. And also, honestly, once I did Sunlight, sometimes we couldn't finish getting through the books. I just read them all summer. And here's what happened. I bought Sunlight when Nathan was in kindergarten. And I had 3 older kids that I was homeschooling, and they were upper middle school and high school. And so and he was in kindergarten, so I was concentrating more on him. And then we came to the end of the school year, and of course, they were more interested in finishing for the school year because they had friends that were now out of school, and they wanted to be with them. So, sorry, I got distracted by something on my screen. So so I would kind of finish with them, and we would just do a little bit. Like I always had them do a little bit of math in the summertime. Not much, like maybe we would be working on math facts. Maybe we'd spend 10 minutes a day doing a math fact drill, or maybe we would do um, play some math game once a week or something like that. It would just be something little. And then I always kept reading something. So at the end of that first year, when Nathan finished kindergarten, we had this little stack of books left. And so I said to him, I left it up to him. He's 5. He was probably 6 then. But anyway, I said, so here's the deal. We're done with school. It's summertime. We can stop if you want to just stop. There's these books left. Would you like me to finish reading these books? Or we can just read some of them. We can pick out which books we want to read, or we can read all of them. He said, no, I want to read all of them. And I said, okay, do you realize that if I read all of these, your new books are going to come by the time I'm finished reading these? So you're not going to have a break. We're just going to go from these into the next thing. And he said, no, that's what I want to do. And I would check with him every 2, 3 weeks. Okay, do you want to stop now? Or we'd finish the book. Do you want me to read another one? Yes. And so that's what we did. And so I did that all the way through with the other kids. I never took long breaks. We did take breaks from most of it. It was way different than during the school year. But we did. I always did a little bit of math here and there. Sometimes I did some other things, and I always kept reading to them. Sometimes it was just books, and sometimes it was like books about history or whatever, something specific. Back to not finishing the textbook. Is it worth trying to finish throughout the summer or into the next school year, or learn to let it go? Let it go. When they're books like math, for instance, the last few chapters are the things they're in that good category. When I was talking about what's necessary and what's important and what's good, they're just in the good category. They're there for like, gee, if the teacher has time and they get to these chapters, that'd be great. If not, eh. And then the next math book starts with like the second half of the math book before, because they do this review for the first few chapters. So frankly, you're not going to miss anything. No, don't worry about it. And thanks, Kayla. And then Catherine says, how did you incorporate outings like the zoo or the museum? Well, I live in Homer, so we don't have them. But I did, you know how it is, you go through the years and you do it differently all the time. We just did whatever we wanted. And I had kind of a flexible schedule. Like I would lay out lesson plans for the week. And then if somebody called and said, hey, we're gonna go down to the beach and have a bonfire, do you want to come with us? Or I can't think of anything educational we would go do. We're gonna go tide pooling tomorrow morning. Do you want to do that? Oh, that's gonna take up my whole morning. Yes, we're gonna go do that. Thank you for inviting me, Project Paula. I'll just go along and let you tell my kids about this, and they'll learn something and get the Project Paula experience. But or I would take them tide pooling or something sometimes, but we would just go do it, and then we would just manage the other side, just get done whatever I could, and I would do the other things the other later in the week if I could, and if not, I'd bump them to the next week, or I'd just go, guess we're not doing whatever. And oh, the other thing is that was what I used Fridays for a good part of the years that I homeschooled. I did whatever I wanted on Fridays. So we did Penny Day, we did quizzes, we did like I had my lesson plans laid out for 4 days, and that gave me a buffer day. And so we could go on field trips. We could go to we'd have a little museum. We could go to the museum. We could go for a hike in the woods. We could go whatever. And we would do these quizzes and these games and stuff. And it was also like a makeup day. They wouldn't know it was a makeup day necessarily, but if things I didn't get to, I could do them on Friday. And even then I still didn't get it all done some of the time, but that's okay. Yeah, Kayla, I'm all on board. She says she's not naturally a Project Paula, and she's thankful for a curriculum that provides project ideas. That's a new thing. When I was homeschooling when my kids were young, that was not an option. There just weren't um, curriculums that did that kind of thing, at least that I was aware of. Some of them were just projecty, like that bird unit I was talking about. but curriculums themselves didn't often have project ideas incorporated in them. And I never bought curriculum anyway. I bought things that I wanted to use for history, well, not history, but things that I wanted to use for science and things that I wanted to use. I bought lots of kits and stuff for science and or things that I wanted to use for math or whatever, and I just did those and they didn't have projects in them. So it is, I did go over a little bit. A few people are leaving. There is another workshop that starts in about 10 minutes. I don't have more questions in my list, but if anybody would like to say something, I can unmute you, like I said before, or you can put something in the question box. And otherwise, I might be out of amazing, helpful tips. I really only have about 5 great tips, and I just repackage them for the different workshops. Not really, but it's lovely. That's one of the benefits. I did this workshop on going through different seasons of life. And that's one of the joys of being old is that you get to say stuff and people think you're wise. I love it. And I love young women. I love young moms and I love having conversations with them that are hopefully helpful. Um, so Odessa used Moving Beyond the Page for the last school year and this school year. We did not use all of the curriculum. Is it possible to use it for the remainder of this coming year? My kids will be 1 year older than the recommended age. You can do whatever you want, Odessa. If that still seems to fit them and feels to you like it would be appropriate for them, then yeah. Especially, I mean, again, there's that caveat about high school, but I think your kids are younger. I'm assuming. So, but yeah, when they're younger than that, you can definitely do whatever you want to do for curriculum. I'm trying to figure out if I should get a comprehensive all-in-one curriculum or piecemeal with curriculums that look awesome. When I piecemeal, I struggle to organize my time/days. Advice for that? No. Yeah, actually I do. But I agree completely. I mean, that's what I did all the way through until I had my youngest, and then I used mostly sunlight. But I always put it together. I also had, it's much more time consuming to figure out how to fit them together. And mostly I was using things that didn't have like lesson plans or teacher manuals or something. And so, like I said, for science, I would just buy science kits and we borrow books from the library and stuff. So that means I'm planning the topics. I'm looking for resources that support that topic. I'm getting the resources and then I'm figuring out that I'm looking at stuff. Okay, how long do I think this is going to take? Should I schedule this over 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or whatever? The more time went by and the more kids I had I was homeschooling, the more I tended to get something more year long. And the more years that have gone by, the more there's really good year long things. I'm not a big fan of all in one curriculum. That's my own bias. And the reason is because I think that whatever you use, if you use the same thing for all the subjects, you're going to maximize its strengths and maximize its weaknesses. And they all have strengths and weaknesses. So I put it together and I'm maximizing my own strengths and weaknesses, probably, who knows? But so the other thing is that I would, oh, thank you, Ruth. I would like I would write out Sunday evening is when I would write out my lesson plans for the week, and I didn't write them out. I only wrote a week at a time. Sometimes I did 2 weeks at a time, but most of the time I just wrote one. And then it would be the next Sunday, and I would be reassessing how far I actually got in this thing, or oh, this went faster. I can actually have them do. I can't think of a good example. Two um, of these handwriting worksheets instead of one every day, or gee, this took too much time when I tried to have them do all 30 problems in my Saxon math book. I don't know, I'm gonna pick out the ones that I think they really need to work on. Saxon says not to do that. That's a horrible example. But I would adjust from week to week. And almost always there would be stuff left over that I didn't get done the week before. And so then I would move it to the next week. And that gave me the option to do that. And then I just at some point gave up and went, ooh, I guess the year's over. And they all seem to be functioning adults. So it worked out okay. You know what? There's a couple of staff in this group. They're probably all rolling their eyes at me like, oh my goodness. But anyway. Okay, I'm out of questions again. And I'm also over. And the next workshop's starting in a few minutes. So we should probably bail. But thank you so much for coming and kind words about things being somewhat helpful. I hope it was an encouragement to you. I really believe that. I really mean that. You are the perfect homeschooler for your child. And don't think otherwise. You know, just keep strengthening your strengths and working on your weaknesses and trying to blend what you think is really important about homeschooling with what it is, who it is that you are and what it is that you can handle. And you're doing a great job. So thank you so much for coming. And I hope you continue to enjoy the fair. Thank you. Bye.